They called him the Invisible Man, the Janitor, who slipped in and out of hallways with a mop and bucket, scarcely noticed by those he served. But Ethan Carter's life would soon turn upside down with a single discovery: a lost wallet stuffed with more money than he'd ever seen in one place. Inside the worn leather were faded photos, a business card, and an ID for a man whose identity no one could have guessed. In returning that wallet, Ethan unwittingly set off a chain reaction that would shatter everything he believed about fortune, honesty, and destiny itself. Ethan Carter had always been the kind of person who noticed the small details in life, the subtle smudges on glass panels, the dusty corners of desks, the worn tiles by the entrance doors. As a janitor at the sprawling Harrington Group headquarters in Philadelphia, he was responsible for sanitizing the floors and emptying waste baskets in more than 40 offices spanning 20 floors of the high-rise building. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Ethan wore his trademark navy overalls with quiet pride. Still, life outside those walls was far from stable. Every evening, after clocking out, Ethan would trek 3 blocks to catch a bus that took him to his cramped one-room apartment above a shuttered bakery on Walnut Street. His mother, Linda Carter, had been hospitalized for 3 months, recovering from a stroke. Medical bills were piling up. Ethan worked extra shifts on weekends, scrubbing the floors at a local diner to pay for her treatment. He rarely had time to do anything beyond work and hospital visits, and his savings account was a sorry sight, barely enough to cover a few more weeks of bills. Each day, the fear of losing everything gnawed at him, so he pushed forward, determined to keep them both afloat. One unremarkable Tuesday evening, Ethan was finishing his shift on the 15th floor. The large glass windows overlooked the bustling city, the reflection of streetlights dancing in streaks on the polished floors. He mopped each hallway meticulously. The smell of disinfectant became so familiar. He barely even noticed it anymore. He was alone that late at night, with the office staff long gone home. He normally relished the solitude, nobody to judge him or talk down to him, but that night a sense of unease trailed him, like a shadow he couldn't quite place. Finishing the last corridor, he headed toward the stairwell. At the base of the stairs, near the water fountain, something caught his eye, a dark shape on the floor. It was a wallet, thick and worn, its edges frayed from years of handling. He picked it up. Immediately, he felt that it was unusually hefty. For a fleeting moment, an image flashed in his mind, an unpaid medical bill, his mother's worried face, the exhaustion in his own eyes each time he visited her. The weight of the wallet hinted at a life-changing sum of money. His heart thumped faster. In a long, deserted hallway, he hesitated. Should he open it, or take it straight to lost and found? Right or wrong, Ethan felt compelled to look for some ID so he could return it personally. He gently pried open the wallet and peeked inside. His breath caught crisp $100 bills, many of them stacked in a neat bundle. Tucked behind them was a Pennsylvania driver's license. The photo was of an older man with silver hair and a warm smile. The name read Benjamin Whitmore. Ethan flipped further, finding several business cards that read B. Whitmore, president of the Whitmore Foundation. He'd heard of the Whitmore Foundation, though only vaguely. Apparently, it funded children's hospitals and education programs across the state. Perhaps this was the man behind it all? Ethan carefully counted the money, more out of shock than greed. Over $2,000 in cash, far more than he made in a month. He almost felt the weight of the entire sum pressing on him, reminding him that there were choices to be made right then and there. It could help his mother's treatments, pay for physical therapy, keep them going for another few months at least. For an instant, temptation reared its head. But Ethan had been raised to be honest above all else. His late father, Dennis Carter, had often told him, "Integrity is what you do when nobody's watching, son." Right now, no one was watching. And so, with trembling hands, Ethan placed the money back into the wallet, carefully tucked the ID inside, and resolved to find Mr. Whitmore's contact details. At the security desk in the lobby, Ethan approached the guard, a middle-aged man named Jerome Jerry Best. Jerry was sipping coffee, looking at the building's security monitors. Ethan showed him the wallet and asked if Jerry knew of a Benjamin Whitmore who might have visited the offices. Jerry scratched his head, claiming he recognized the name from a few sign-in logs over the last month, but the building's official occupant rosters never listed him as a tenant or employee. He might have been a guest or sponsor for an event in the conference hall on the 10th floor. Jerry pulled up the visitor sign-in from that day. Indeed, there it was, Benjamin Whitmore, meeting with Miss Gwendolyn Harrington, 2:00 p.m. A phone number was scribbled next to it. Jerry scrawled it on a sticky note and handed it to Ethan. Ethan planned to call first thing the next morning. After all, it was close to midnight. Disturbing a millionaire at that hour felt presumptuous. Tucking the wallet safely into his bag, Ethan clocked out and left. The night air was cold against his cheeks as he stepped onto the nearly empty street. A single question rang in his mind. Why would a man like Whitmore carry that kind of money in a battered old wallet? And why had he lost it so carelessly? That night, Ethan barely slept. Images of hospital bills overlapped with moral arguments in his dreams. He pictured the possibility of Mr. Whitmore telling him to keep the money, or worse, accusing him of theft. The swirling anxieties kept him awake until daybreak. At sunrise, Ethan was at the bus stop, the wallet hidden carefully in his inner jacket pocket. He dialed the phone number from the sticky note. On the fifth ring, a groggy voice answered. "Hello?" said a man, sounding mildly concerned. "Mr. Whitmore," Ethan said, trying to sound as polite as possible. "My name is Ethan Carter. I work as a janitor at the Harrington Group building. I found your wallet last night. I wanted to return it to you." There was a pause on the other end then. "You have my wallet? Thank you. I just realized I'd lost it and was about to retrace my steps. I can't believe The man trailed off, relief seeping into his tone. "I can meet you anytime, anywhere. I really appreciate this, Mr. Carter." They agreed to meet at a nearby coffee shop, simply called Brew and Bloom, a cozy spot Ethan liked for its cheap drip coffee and free refills. Anxiety set in as he approached the cafe. Ethan had never met a millionaire in person. He didn't know whether to expect arrogance or graciousness. As soon as Ethan stepped inside the cafe, a tall, older man in a simple grey coat waved hesitantly. It was the same face from the ID, only with more lines around the eyes. Benjamin Whitmore looked decidedly unremarkable for a wealthy philanthropist. If anything, he looked like a kindly grandfather, with eyes that sparkled with youthful curiosity. "Mr. Carter, I presume?" he greeted, extending a firm handshake. Ethan offered him the wallet, suddenly awkward. I'm glad to have found you. I made sure everything is still in there." Whitmore opened it, counted the bills quickly, checked his cards. Satisfied, he exhaled with a soft chuckle. "I'm impressed. Not many people would have done what you did." He placed the wallet into his coat pocket. "I owe you a debt of gratitude." Ethan shook his head. "It's just the right thing to do, sir." They sat down. Whitmore insisted on buying Ethan a coffee and a pastry. Over small talk, Ethan learned that the Whitmore Foundation was indeed run by Benjamin and his wife, Catherine, who had passed away 3 years ago. He spoke of her with a mixture of pride and loss, describing how they had spent decades building philanthropic endeavors, children's hospitals, scholarships, community centers. As Ethan listened, his anxiety ebbed. Mr. Whitmore was nothing like the cutthroat CEOs he'd always imagined. "So you work as a janitor?" Whitmore asked, sipping his black coffee. "Yes," Ethan said. "Nights at Harrington Group, days at a small diner. My mother's in the hospital, so I need to keep up with the bills." Whitmore's expression flickered with understanding. He didn't pry, but the concern in his eyes told Ethan that the older man genuinely cared. As they said their goodbyes, Whitmore insisted Ethan take a folded slip of paper from him. Ethan opened it to reveal a check for $10,000. His heart pounded, and he felt lightheaded. I can't accept this," Ethan stammered. "I didn't return the wallet for a reward." Whitmore laid a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I know, that's exactly why you deserve it. Think of it as thanks from an old man who's grateful for your honesty." He pressed the check firmly into Ethan's hand. "One more thing, I'd love for you to come by my foundation sometime. Meet the team. I might have a job opportunity for you if you're interested." Something more, fulfilling. The rest of that day felt like a dream to Ethan. $10,000 was a fortune in his world, enough to cover a huge portion of his mother's bills, with some left over for an emergency. The possibility of a new job? He dared not get his hopes too high, but the invitation planted a seed of optimism he hadn't felt in years. Still, life had a way of complicating things. It didn't take long for rumors to swirl at Harrington Group about the janitor who'd found a wallet full of cash. Word spread that the wallet belonged to a rich old guy, and soon enough, curiosity grew. A few co-workers wondered if Ethan kept the money for himself. Jerry the guard confirmed he'd watched Ethan turn it in properly. Nonetheless, office gossip thrived on speculation. A close friend of Ethan's, a fellow janitor named Teresa Jackson, pulled him aside one afternoon. "Is it true? Some wealthy guy's paying you big bucks for returning his wallet?" Ethan sighed. "I guess so. He wrote me a check for $10,000. I haven't even cashed it yet. I'm still worried it might be a trick." Teresa's eyes widened. "A trick? If he's who he says he is, that money is pocket change to him. Ethan, do you have any idea how huge this is? Your mother's bills, this could change everything." But something about the entire situation didn't feel real to Ethan. At night, he pored over hospital invoices, trying to decide which ones to pay first, double-checking the legitimacy of the check. He looked up the Whitmore Foundation online, reading about various philanthropic works. He found photos of Mr. Whitmore cutting ribbons at children's wards, standing beside local officials, or awarding scholarships. Indeed, the foundation was legitimate. And so, gingerly, Ethan began to accept that maybe, just maybe, life was throwing him a break. A week later, his mother Linda had a major relapse. She collapsed while doing physical therapy, and Ethan rushed to the hospital, check in his pocket. He wrote out a portion of it to cover the immediate cost of an MRI and specialized medication. Though worried sick, he felt a bit of relief that at least money wasn't the barrier it once was. Without the check, he couldn't have provided immediate funds for the advanced scans and treatments. That, above all else, made him beyond grateful to Mr. Whitmore, but fate wasn't done weaving its threads just yet. One stormy evening, Ethan answered a call from a withheld number. On the other end, a hesitant voice introduced herself as Miss Gwendolyn Harrington, the CEO of Harrington Group, granddaughter of the company's founder. Ethan stiffened, not used to hearing from the top brass. She explained, "I hope you don't mind me calling, Mr. Carter. I received word you recently helped retrieve a wallet belonging to Mr. Whitmore. He and I had a meeting last week, and he mentioned you." "Oh," Ethan replied, heart pounding. Yes, ma'am, I was just doing my job." The CEO gave a slight chuckle. "Mr. Whitmore was extremely impressed by your honesty. He's actually an old friend of my family. He asked if you could attend a charity gala we're hosting next month as a guest of honor. We'd also like to acknowledge your act of integrity. It's a formal affair, black tie and all. I realize It might be outside your comfort zone, but I do hope you'll consider coming." Ethan's mind reeled. Attend a gala? Dress in a tuxedo? The idea felt surreal, but how could he refuse? He stammered a polite acceptance, feeling simultaneously honored and terrified. After hanging up, he stared at his reflection in the mirror of his tiny apartment, trying to picture himself in a suit among billionaires and socialites. It felt like an impossible scenario. In the following weeks, Teresa Jackson and Jerry teased him playfully about the upcoming event, offering half-joking advice on etiquette. They even chipped in to buy him a second-hand tuxedo from a thrift shop. It needed some alterations. Teresa's aunt was a seamstress, and she promised to make it look better than new. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to visit his mother daily, relieved that her condition was marginally improving thanks to the better medication. Linda Carter saw the spark of hope in her son's eyes. He told her about returning the wallet and the invitation to the gala. She smiled, pressing his hand in hers. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said softly. "Go, enjoy yourself. You never know what doors might open." The night of the charity gala arrived. Torrents of rain lashed the city, but inside the grand ballroom of the Harrington Group Tower, the atmosphere was one of elegance, warmth, and conviviality. Crystal chandeliers reflected on polished marble floors. Lush floral arrangements adorned each table, and waiters in crisp uniforms glided around with trays of champagne flutes. The wealthy and influential of Philadelphia were all in attendance, each wearing designer evening wear. Ethan swallowed back nerves at the entrance. His second-hand tux had been tailored just right, and though it wasn't brand new, he wore it with as much pride as any man in the room. Miss Gwendolyn Harrington, resplendent in a shimmering navy gown, greeted him personally. She introduced him to various business leaders and donors, some of whom commented on the famous wallet story they'd heard in passing. Ethan blushed under the praise, doing his best to remain humble. At a table near the stage, Ethan found Mr. Whitmore seated beside a distinguished group of individuals, some doctors, some entrepreneurs, some philanthropic board members. Whitmore lit up when he saw Ethan. Standing, he clasped Ethan's hand firmly. "I'm glad you made it," he said, guiding Ethan to an empty chair between him and a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Friedman, the director of a children's cancer research initiative. Dr. Friedman was apparently a dear friend of Whitmore's, but what startled Ethan more was that she had heard of his mother's hospital. She offered him contact information for specialists who might further accelerate Linda's recovery. Grateful, Ethan tucked her card into his pocket, feeling more connections forming than he'd ever dreamed possible. After a sumptuous dinner and a few speeches from event organizers, Miss Harrington took the podium, the microphone echoing softly through the ballroom. A hush fell over the crowd as they turned to listen. "Thank you all for joining our annual charity gala," Miss Harrington began. "Tonight, we recognize the philanthropic efforts that lift our communities. But we'd also like to highlight a small act of integrity that has had a big impact. Would Mr. Ethan Carter please join us on stage?" Ethan felt every eye in the room pivot his way. His legs turned to jelly, but Whitmore gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Slowly, Ethan made his way up to the podium. Stage lights glared down on him, making the crowd a dazzling blur of black suits and glittering gowns. "We've all heard stories of people finding valuables and returning them, but rarely do we acknowledge the courage it can take," Miss Harrington continued. "Ethan Carter works as a janitor in our building. He recently found a wallet containing a considerable sum of money and personally returned it to its rightful owner, Mr. Whitmore. Rather than pocketing the cash, he made an honest choice, and we commend him for that." A short round of applause rippled through the ballroom. Ethan felt his cheeks burning. Miss Harrington concluded, "I can't think of a better example of our company values, integrity, community, and compassion. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for reminding us of these values. We have a small token of appreciation for you. To Ethan's astonishment, she handed him a plaque inscribed with his name and the words, "In recognition of outstanding integrity." The crowd erupted in louder applause. He bowed his head, clutching the plaque tightly, unsure how he deserved such honor. For a moment, Ethan felt a glimmer of pride that soared above the daily struggles he faced. On that stage, he wasn't a nobody or an invisible janitor. He was a person recognized for his moral compass. Yet, as the applause died down, Miss Harrington cleared her throat. "We have one last special guest who would like to speak," she said, stepping aside. A distinguished older woman took the stage, leaning on a cane. She was introduced as Elizabeth Townsend, an esteemed philanthropist in her own right, rumored to have known everyone from the mayor to the city's biggest investors. She was known for her tough negotiating style and unwavering commitment to supporting homeless shelters. There was an edge of hushed reverence in the crowd as Miss Townsend began to speak. "It's rare these days," she said, her voice carrying an air of authority, "to find an everyday hero. We often look to celebrities, politicians, or leading executives, forgetting that real heroism can be found in the simplest acts of decency. Mr. Carter, you have my personal thanks." Because, as it happens, she paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd, building tension. "As it happens, I was at the hospital earlier this week, where your mother is being treated. I saw her receiving care, heard about how you've supported her single-handedly while balancing multiple jobs. I discovered something else that might surprise you. This entire scenario, from the wallet to the moment you're standing on this stage, has deeper roots." Ethan frowned, confusion stirring in his chest. The crowd grew silent, equally perplexed. She gestured for him to remain on the stage. "Decades ago, my sister was in critical condition at St. Agnes Hospital," Miss Townsend continued. "She might not have survived, if not for a young volunteer who helped raise funds for the specialized surgery. That volunteer was Linda Carter, your mother. She spearheaded a local fundraiser in our neighborhood, asked neighbors to donate pennies, nickels, dimes, and eventually collected enough to help pay for my sister's operation." Ethan's world spun. He had known his mother volunteered occasionally, but not that her efforts had been so significant. He swallowed, trying to process this revelation. "I always wondered what became of Linda Carter," Miss Townsend said, her voice faltering slightly. "I discovered she had fallen on hard times, working multiple jobs to support her family, then ended up in the hospital herself. It was heartbreakingly ironic, but as chance would have it, your father, Dennis Carter, once taught me the difference between pity and genuine support." He said pity was fleeting, but true support changed lives. She took a breath. "We owe a debt to the Carter family, one that stands long overdue." "You, Ethan," returned a lost wallet, "setting in motion a chance for us to repay your mother's kindness." At these words, Ethan's eyes stung with tears. The entire audience seemed to lean forward, riveted. Miss Townsend gestured to someone in the wings. A woman with a crisp manila envelope walked onto the stage and handed it to Miss Townsend. "For your mother's medical bills, plus her rehabilitation care, I am pleased to announce that the Townsend Trust, in collaboration with the Whitmore Foundation, will fully cover her expenses. And, if she wishes, will have a place for her volunteering spirit once she recovers, with flexible hours." The audience erupted in applause. Ethan's hand trembled, tears sliding down his cheeks as he clutched the envelope that symbolized hope for his mother's recovery. He turned to see Whitmore in the front row, beaming tears in his own eyes. Gwendolyn Harrington wore a broad smile, evidently in on the arrangement. Miss Townsend extended a hand to Ethan, and he gripped it, overcome with gratitude and disbelief. "You never know whose life you're touching," Miss Townsend said. her words resonating over the cheering crowd. Sometimes a simple act of honesty resonates through time and space, bridging the gap between what was and what can be. And to your mother, thank you for helping my sister all those years ago. Tonight, we honor that legacy. Ethan left the stage to a standing ovation, the entire turn of events feeling unreal. He felt dwarfed by the generosity, but also warmed by a cosmic sense of justice. The same mother who taught him integrity and compassion had unknowingly impacted countless lives, including the Townsend family. And now her compassion was circling back to her son in ways Ethan could never have foreseen. After the event, as the guests mingled, Ethan found himself surrounded by well-wishers wanting to shake his hand or offer him their business cards, referencing future opportunities. He felt a bit overwhelmed, but also oddly validated. In a single night, the lines between social classes blurred, reminding him that decency transcended wealth or status. Eventually, Mr. Whitmore pulled Ethan aside, away from the bustling crowd. "I've been meaning to tell you something else," Whitmore said, a playful grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You remember how I mentioned a possible job opportunity?" Ethan nodded, trying to find his voice. "Yes, sir." Whitmore patted him on the back. "I spoke to Miss Harrington. She's impressed with your work ethic and your honesty. We've got a new program launching a facilities management training initiative. It's a partnership between Harrington Group and my foundation. It's designed to help people like you who show great potential move up from janitorial or security positions into supervisory or administrative roles. We want you to be the first candidate." Ethan felt something electric course through him, a mixture of excitement, terror, and pride. I don't know what to say." Whitmore's voice softened. "Say yes, Ethan. You're ready for this." Ethan had never imagined such a possibility. Supervising building operations, overseeing budgets, staff, or scheduling. It was a leap from pushing a mop around. For an instant, self-doubt flickered. Could he handle it? But he remembered the plaque in his hand, the applause, the moment Miss Townsend revealed his mother's hidden act of heroism. If Linda Carter could do so much for others, maybe her son could do the same. He nodded. "I'm in." In the weeks that followed, Ethan's life transformed in ways he could never have predicted. He enrolled in training courses sponsored by Harrington Group, learning about project management, budgeting, and leadership. He still worked as a janitor for the time being, but with a new sense of purpose. There was a light at the end of his once dreary tunnel. His mother's treatment improved exponentially. Freed from the crushing burden of mounting bills, Linda Carter could finally focus on her rehabilitation. She made faster progress in physical therapy, regaining strength each day. The hospital staff noticed the difference. Linda had more energy, more hope. On the day she was discharged, Ethan was there, waiting to wheel her to the exit. Miss A. Townsend even visited, giving Linda a bouquet of lilies and a heartfelt hug. One evening, as Linda sat in her wheelchair by the window of their modest apartment, watching the sunset over the skyline, Ethan told her everything, from picking up Mr. Whitmore's lost wallet, to the scholarship-like job training he was receiving, to Miss Townsend's surprising connection to her old fundraiser. Linda listened, tears glazing her eyes. When Ethan finished, she simply whispered, "We never know how the seeds we plant will grow in another's garden." His father's words echoed in his mind, "Integrity is what you do when nobody's watching." This principle had guided Ethan to return the wallet, and the consequences of that single decision had blossomed into events beyond his wildest dreams. Yet, life remained filled with smaller challenges. Linda still needed physical therapy for months to come. They had to arrange for an in-home caregiver while Ethan worked. The transitional program required Ethan to juggle classes on top of his evening shifts. But these challenges felt surmountable buoyed by support from the Whitmore Foundation and Miss Townsend's trust. With each passing day, Ethan felt less like an invisible janitor and more like someone forging a new path, both for himself and his mother. When Ethan finally stepped into his new role, an assistant facility supervisor for the Harrington Group's downtown offices, he experienced an odd rush of déjà vu. The hallways and offices were the same floors he had once mopped each night, but now he walked them in a collared shirt and slacks, a clipboard in hand, overseeing tasks, scheduling staff rotations, and ensuring building regulations were met. Teresa teased him that he looked too fancy now, but she also took pride in seeing him succeed. She remained a good friend, and Jerry, the security guard, proudly told everyone that it was their own Ethan Carter who had moved up. The entire building staff felt a sense of unity, as if Ethan's promotion was a collective victory. Only one question lingered, a question that gnawed at Ethan during quiet moments. Why had Mr. Whitmore brought so much cash to a meeting that day in the first place? It was Miss Harrington who eventually filled in the blanks. She mentioned that Mr. Whitmore had planned to donate a small scholarship fund that afternoon, one specifically set aside for an employee's relative who needed financial help with college. He had intended to leave the money as a symbolic first donation, but he never got around to it, and the wallet fell out of his coat pocket. In other words, the entire fiasco had begun with a philanthropic gesture, only to end with an even greater philanthropic outcome. The revelation brought Ethan a quiet sense of awe. Time rolled on. The day came when Linda Carter returned to the hospital, but this time not as a patient, but as a volunteer. She hobbled slightly, still reliant on a cane, but the bright smile on her face shone with renewed purpose. The staff recognized her from her inpatient days, greeting her with open arms. Miss Townsend had arranged for Linda to be part of a community outreach team, helping gather resources and emotional support for families in need. Linda's old fundraising passion was reignited, bridging the years that had passed since she was that young volunteer who saved a stranger's life. For Ethan, seeing his mother back on her feet was the greatest gift imaginable. He worked diligently in his new role, determined to prove himself worthy of the trust Mr. Whitmore and Miss Harrington had placed in him. The responsibilities were daunting at first, managing supply inventories, scheduling maintenance times for offices, balancing a workforce of custodians and repair crews. But each time he felt overwhelmed, he remembered how far he'd come. The memory of that lost wallet always served as a reminder that honesty and kindness never go unrewarded, though it might take time for the reward to manifest. One late afternoon, as the sun cast warm shades of orange across the city skyline, Ethan's office phone rang. He picked it up to hear a familiar voice. "Hello, Ethan," Mr. Whitmore greeted. "I just wanted to check on you. How's the new position treating you?" "Better than I ever imagined," Ethan replied. "I'm learning a lot. Thank you, really." A gentle laugh came through the speaker. "You earned every bit of it. By the way, I'm hosting a small gathering at the foundation tomorrow. Some potential donors are stopping by, and I'd like you to share your story, if you're comfortable. Nothing too formal. Just be yourself." Ethan hesitated, but agreed. If sharing his journey could inspire others to see the value of honesty, perhaps he should do it. The next day, he arrived at the Whitmore Foundation's main office, an elegant, historic building with high ceilings and well-lit corridors. In the conference room, he found a small group of men and women dressed in suits. They turned their heads when Ethan entered, as Mr. Whitmore introduced him as the young man who reminded me the world still has good people. At first, Ethan felt self-conscious, but he spoke from the heart. He told them about how returning a lost wallet, an act he considered simply common decency, had transformed his life. He described the relief of paying for his mother's medical treatments, the overwhelming gratitude he felt toward Miss Townsend, Miss Harrington, and, of course, Mr. Whitmore. He emphasized that there was no grand plan behind his decision to return the money. It was simply how he was raised, and that returning it had unexpectedly changed the course of his life and his mother's. When he finished, the donors offered a sincere round of applause, some wiping away tears. Mr. Whitmore concluded the meeting with a brief statement. "It's never the size of the act that matters, it's the honesty, the integrity behind it." That's what we invest in here at the Whitmore Foundation, people who embody those qualities. On his way out, Ethan paused by a glass display case in the lobby. Inside were photos showcasing the Foundation's impact over the years, children receiving scholarships, families at the opening of community centers, medical staff celebrating new equipment donations. One small plaque read, "In loving memory of Catherine Whitmore, who believed that a single kind act could move mountains." Ethan reflected on how Catherine's faith in kindness mirrored Linda Carter's. They were kindred spirits, separated by time and circumstance, joined by the ripple effect of benevolence. From that day forward, Ethan carried an unshakable conviction, no matter how dire the circumstances, a seed of genuine kindness and integrity could flourish beyond anything imaginable. He'd lived it firsthand. The story of the poor janitor returning a lost wallet only to uncover a network of compassion spanning decades was testament to that. And so it was that Ethan Carter, once invisible, once certain of a hopeless future, stepped firmly onto a path paved by empathy, honesty, and gratitude. He never forgot the night he found Mr. Whitmore's wallet, a moment that became the turning point of his life, revealing truths about destiny, generosity, and the ways in which one good deed can come full circle to shine light in the darkest corners. The story of Ethan Carter reminds us that even the humblest actions can create life-altering waves. In a world that often celebrates the loud and flashy, it's the quiet heroism of everyday people that can restore our faith in one another. By returning a lost wallet, Ethan set in motion an outpouring of goodwill that not only saved his mother, but unveiled hidden bonds going back decades. Honesty opened doors he never knew existed, granting him a fresh start and reaffirming the power of integrity in shaping our destinies. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread stories that shine a light on humanity's best qualities and remind us all that a single act of kindness can echo through time, connecting strangers, healing old wounds, and inspiring hope for the future. Thank you for watching.